Greetings, everyone, and welcome to the episode 1 of the Joel 2 Army. Just wanted to ask you a quick question. Have you ever wanted to belong into something that was bigger than yourself? I mean, it's important to be doing the things that you need to do to take care of yourself and your family, but be belonging to something that's bigger than you, bigger than anything you can imagine, that make a world impact. Well, that's the Joel 2 Army. We're here to make a global impact and in a very short time. So, who is Joel? Well, Joel was a prophet from the Old Testament. He was alive around 900 BC, and he was one of the first prophets to write what he saw in his visions. And he's classified as one of the 12 minor prophets. And the reason why they call them the minor prophets is because their writing stack was kind of small. The major prophets would be people like Ezekiel or Isaiah, who wrote quite extensively. So it's not any um, kind of slam on whether they were great or not. That has nothing to do with it. A prophet is a prophet of the Lord. It's just the amount of writing they wrote. So Joel was one of the first prophets to write down. He only wrote 3 chapters for his book, and it's all dealing with the end times. And so, in order to understand who the Joel 2 army is, which is you need to first understand who is Joel, what did he say, and why is it important today. So let's go ahead and get started. We're going to be doing 3 different Bible verses, and I'll cover them for you very quickly, and then we'll discuss what this is all about. So, Joel, as I said before, wrote about the end times, and most of his book talks about the country and the people of Israel. But on Joel chapter 2, verse 28, he starts out with, and afterward I will pour out my spirit on all people. Your sons and daughters will prophesy, your old men will dream dreams, and your young men will see visions. Even on my servants, both men and women, I will pour out my spirit in those days. I will show wonders in the heavens and on earth, and blood and fire and billows of smoke. So that was Joel 2. What makes this really interesting is that in Acts, we're looking at the apostles and Peter specifically, and this is the very first sermon he gave. He suddenly gets empowered by the Holy Spirit, and his very first sermon, he references back to Joel. He starts to address the crowd, and he's telling the fellow Jews, we're here in Jerusalem, and let me explain what you're really hearing. You're not; these people are not drunk as you suppose. It's only 9 in the morning. No, this is what we're talking about. We're talking about what the prophet Joel spoke. He said in Acts chapter 2, verse 17, in the last days, God says, I will pour out my spirit on all people. Your sons and your daughters will prophesy. Your young men will see visions, and your old men will dream dreams. Even on my servants, both men and women, I will pour out my spirit in those days, and they will prophesy. So he basically said the exact same things and quoted Joel, and it was his very first sermon. So obviously, it was something very, very important that he was trying to point out. And it's interesting to see that we never see the Holy Spirit pouring out on people during the entire, almost all of the Old Testament, and not anything into the 4 Gospels. We don't see it until Acts, and then after that we see it happening. And the reason why is because the Holy Spirit can only come on righteous people, and we by default are sinners. We can't host the Holy Spirit. As soon as God's Spirit would be upon us, it couldn't stay on us very long before it would start to judge us. So we couldn't have that happening. But what happened is after Jesus did his sacrifice and came back to from the resurrection, he now wiped out sin. So now sin is no longer the issue. The Holy Spirit can now come to people, and it's not an issue. As long as those people are open and to receive, they can have this. And that's what was going on. Is right after that, it was starting to happen everywhere. The Holy Spirit was pouring out on everyone, and it was just in the thousands. So that's the importance in there. But before we get to the reason for today, let's get right on to Matthew chapter 20. This is Jesus speaking, and he talks about this interesting parable. He said, for the kingdom of heaven is like a landowner who went out early in the morning to hire workers for his vineyard. He agreed to pay them a denarius, which is a day's wages, for a day, and sent them off to his vineyard. About 9 in the morning, he went out and saw others standing in the marketplace doing nothing. He told them, you also go and work in my vineyard, and I will pay you whatever is right. So they went. He went out again at noon, and then at 3 in the afternoon and did the same thing. Then about 5 in the afternoon, he went out and he found still others standing around. And he asked them, why have you been standing here all day long, doing nothing? Because no one has hired us, they answered. He said to them, "You go and work in my vineyard." When the evening came, the owner and the vineyard said to his foreman, "Call the workers and pay them their wages, beginning with the last ones I hired and going to the first." The workers who were hired at 5 in the afternoon each received their denarius, and so those who came that were hired first, they expected to receive more, but each of them also received a denarius. When they received it, they began to grumble against the landowner. "These who you hired last only worked 1 hour," they said, "and you have made them equal to us who have borne the burden of the work of the heat of the day." But he answered one of them, "I am not being unfair to you, friend. Didn't you agree to work for 1 denarius? Take your pay and go. I want to give the one who I hired for the last hour the same I gave you. Don't I have the right to do what I want with my money? Or are you envious that I am a generous? So the last will be first and the first shall be last." So that is Jesus talking about this very interesting parable. Now, what does it all mean? Well, let's take a look at it real quick. First of all, the landowners often the reference to God. God is the landowner. He owns it all. Everything that we have, everything that there is. And the vineyard would be the world. It's basically the harvesting world, the world of believers. The people that haven't yet been reached for the gospel. And so the laborers are obviously then must be those people who've been drawn as disciples to go out and win those people. So he discusses this very interesting situation. We have these people who were at the very beginning that got hired at the beginning, and they did the work all their entire lives. So you could think of those people as the apostles, the disciples right there with Jesus, and witnessed Jesus and everything he did. And they worked their entire lives doing an incredible thing. They did world changing things. They did miracles. They did all kinds of speeches, all kinds of sermons. They touched people in all kinds of places and brought them to a working knowledge of God. And they spent their lives doing this, and they lived and died. So many of them martyred. Many of them went through great hardships. And as we go through the different hours of the day, we're seeing different levels of people being brought back in to working for God and doing their thing. But here's an interesting one: the people that were at 5 o'clock, so they barely worked 1 hour, and they touched the world and were world changers as well, but they only did it for 1 hour, and they were for very short. And in fact, their time was so short that maybe the previous people might have been a little jealous of them. We did all this work and made all this effort, and you guys just step in and do a quick little thing and you're done. Well, I think it's very interesting because I think that describes what's going to be happening here very, very soon. In fact, I've already started hearing reports of it, is that the Lord, as we enter the last days, is going to be pouring out his Spirit on levels we have never even imagined before. Picture this for just a second. Stadiums. We just watched the Super Bowl not too long ago. Stadiums full of people, and the Holy Spirit's going to be pouring out on them. 50,000 people in one shot. Could you just imagine that? What would happen if you had people that were touched by the power of God, that they had the Holy Spirit working in them, and they could do miracles, all at being activated all at the same time, and not just in one place, but everywhere? Well, that's what Joel was describing, and that's what Peter described as well, is that this is what's going to be happening. And it's happening now. I was listening to a report from a man who was down in Bakersfield, California, and he said Babylon itself, and yet he did a big town revival, and hundreds of kids just turned their lives over to the Lord. He said people that were like drug dealers, these people are came walking in and carrying bags of drugs, dropped it on the ground and said, "That's it, I'm done." And the Holy Spirit touched them. And he goes, and we hadn't even started doing the actual sermon. We were just getting ready to get started. And these people walked in, and all of a sudden, boom, they've got hit. That's what's going to be happening. It's going to be happening more and more. We're going to hear about it so much. It's just going to be amazing. And it's going to be for a very short time. So these people, they're going to be touched by the Lord. They're going to be filled with the Holy Spirit, and they're going to have the powers from the Holy Spirit. They're going to be able to heal. They're going to be able to speak in languages that they never spoke before. They're going to be able to do all kinds of things, see visions, see the future, describe people's events and things like that. Amazing stuff. They're just going to be able to know and see things but they're only going to do it for a very short time. That's the key thing, is it's going to be very short. They're not going to spend their entire lives doing this. It's going to be a very short time. It may be 2, 3, maybe 5 years, maybe not even that. We don't know. All we do know is that this is going to be the most incredible revival the world, not the United States, not California, not anywhere, the world is ever going to see. It's going to be the biggest and last revival before Jesus's return, and that's what I'm so excited about. So I'm certainly not one of these people who's going to be the young one getting poured on the Holy Spirit. I'm going to be one of those old men dreaming dreams and seeing visions. So I'm excited about that, and I'm happy to play the part I can play. So my prayer is that you become that world's changer. You become involved in something so big that God's doing in this world, and you're going to have an impact that most men and women spend their entire lives doing. You're going to only do it for a few short years, and it's going to be done. And that's what I'm excited about. So welcome to the Joel 2 Army. I have links about more youth ministry and more youth gatherings going on that are also going to be doing other things like this, and other links to websites. So check them all out, and, tune in, because each week I'm going to be providing something new about the Joel 2 Army. So welcome aboard. And remember, the weapons you're going to be using are not of this world. They're going to be the Holy Spirit and the words of life. So we're looking forward to that. So that's me signing off. Thanks. We'll talk to you later.